One misfired message connects a pregnant woman with a billionaire grieving his sister's loss. What starts as comfort turns into something deeper. But can a bond born by accident survive the truth? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun rose over Morada Alta farm, casting long shadows across the vast fields where cattle grazed peacefully. But in the old stables at the far end of the property, Helena was already hard at work. Her brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, she moved with quiet purpose among the horses that others had given up on. "Good morning, Estrella," she whispered to a thin mare with a scarred flank. "Today's going to be a good day, I can feel it." The horse nickered softly, pressing her muzzle against Helena's palm. At 30 years old, Helena's face showed a beauty that had nothing to do with makeup or fancy clothes. Her eyes, though, carried a sadness that never quite went away, even when she smiled. "Let's clean this leg up," she said, gently touching the bandage on Estrella's front leg. "Then we'll get you out for some sunshine." 3 years she'd been here now, 3 years since that terrible day that changed everything. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime ago. Other times the memory was so fresh it took her breath away. Helena had built a life here, hidden away from the world. The old stable had become her home, a simple cot in the corner of the tack room, a small hot plate where she made coffee, and shelves filled with veterinary books she couldn't bring herself to throw away, even though she'd sworn never to practice again. The ranch hands mostly left her alone. They thought she was odd, the quiet woman who talked to horses but barely spoke to people. That was fine with Helena. The horses didn't judge her. They didn't know what she'd done. "Miss Helena?" A young ranch hand named Diego appeared at the stable door. "There's a car coming up the drive, fancy city car." Helena nodded, barely looking up from her work. "Thank you, Diego." She didn't care about visitors. They were usually business associates of Seu Norberto, the owner of Morada Alta. They never came to the old stables anyway. But this visitor was different. This visitor had come to stay. Artur. Mendonça gripped the steering wheel of his BMW as he drove up the long dirt road to the main house. Every turn of the wheels felt like moving backward in time, back to a childhood he'd spent years trying to forget. He hadn't been back to Morada Alta in nearly 8 years, not since he'd left for São Paulo, determined to build a life away from his father's shadow. Now, at 30, he was back because there was nowhere else to go. His design firm had failed. His girlfriend had left him, and then came the phone call. Seu Norberto was dead, heart attack, they said. Quick and unexpected. Artur felt nothing when he heard the news. The old man had been dead to him for years anyway. "Time to sell this place. And be done with it," he muttered as the sprawling white farmhouse came into view. It looked smaller than he remembered, less imposing. Just a house, after all. As he parked, Helena, the housekeeper who had been there since Artur was a boy, came hurrying out to meet him. "Senor Artur," she cried, her eyes red from crying. "Thank God you've come. The lawyers have been calling. There's so much to handle." Artur forced a smile he didn't feel. "Hello, Helena. It's been a long time." "Too long," she said, looking him up and down. "You're so thin. City life doesn't feed you well. Come inside, I've made lunch." "I'm not hungry," he said automatically, then saw the hurt in her eyes. "But maybe a little coffee." Inside, the house was exactly as he remembered, large, expensive, and cold. His father's presence lingered in every room, in the hunting trophies, on the walls and the heavy, dark furniture. "Your father's study is as he left it," Helena said, pouring coffee into a delicate cup that Artur remembered from childhood. "The lawyer said not to touch anything until you arrived." Artur nodded, staring out the window at the vast property. Morada Alta was one of the largest cattle ranches in the region, over 5,000 acres of prime land, worth a fortune to the right. "Buyer, when is the funeral?" he asked. "Day after tomorrow. Many people will come. Your father was respected." Feared was more like it, Artur thought. Seu Norberto had ruled Morada Alta with an iron fist. Nothing happened without his approval, and God help anyone who crossed him. "I'm going to walk around," Artur said, setting down his untouched coffee. "Get reacquainted with the place." Helena nodded. "Your room is ready whenever you want it." Artur stepped out onto the wide veranda. The air smelled of grass and earth, so different from the city. Against his will, Memories flooded back, running through the fields as a boy, his mother's laughter. Before she died, and later his father's constant disappointment. "You're too soft for this life, boy," Seu Norberto would say. "A man needs to be hard to run a place like Morada Alta." Artur had tried to be what his father wanted, but it never worked. The ranch hands snickered behind his back when he couldn't rope a calf or when he flinched at branding time. By 18, he'd given up trying and left for the city, where being sensitive wasn't a sin. Now, as the new owner of Morada Alta, he felt like an imposter. He didn't belong here, never had. His feet carried him away from the main house down the path toward the old stables. As a boy, the stables had been his refuge. While his father worked with the cattle, Artur would slip away to watch the horses. There was something about their quiet strength that calmed him. As he approached, he heard a woman's voice, soft and low, almost singing. Curious, he moved closer. Through the open stable door, he saw her, a slender woman with her back to him, brushing a horse's mane. The animal, a dapple grey that looked old and thin, stood perfectly still, eyes half closed in contentment. "That's it, Luna," the woman murmured. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you again." There was something in her voice that made Artur stop, a gentleness he hadn't heard in a long time. The horse lowered its head to nuzzle the woman's shoulder, and she laughed, a sound so unexpected and bright that Artur found himself smiling. He must have made a noise because suddenly the woman turned. Her eyes, wide and startled, met his. For a moment neither spoke. "I'm sorry," Artur said finally. "I didn't mean to interrupt." The woman's face closed like a door. She took a step back, one hand still on the horse's neck. "Can I help you?" Her voice was different now, cautious, guarded. "I'm Artur Mendonça, Seu Norberto's son." Her expression changed, just slightly. Recognition and something else. Wariness. "I'm Helena," she said. "I work with the horses." Artur looked around the stable. There were 6 horses that he could see, all of them looking old or injured in some way. "These aren't the ranch horses," he said, confused. "The working horses would be in the main stables near the cattle pens." "No," Helena agreed. "These are the ones no one wants anymore, the ones your father was going to get rid of." There was a challenge in her voice that surprised him. Few people had ever spoken about his father that way, at least not to his face. "Get rid of?" Artur asked. Helena's chin lifted slightly. "Sell for slaughter. These horses are too old or too injured to work. Your father said they were eating profits." The matter-of-fact way she said it made Artur wince. That sounded exactly like something his father would say. "But they're still here," he pointed out. "I asked to keep them, to care for them myself." She turned back to the grey horse, continuing to brush its mane. "Your father agreed as long as it didn't cost him anything." "And does it cost anything?" Helena shrugged. "I use my own money for their feed. Diego helps me sometimes, brings medicine from town when I need it." Artur moved closer, looking at the horse she was grooming. Up close, he could see that one of its eyes was clouded white. Blind. "This one can't see," he said. "Luna lost her sight 2 years ago. Eye infection." Helena's hand moved gently over the horse's neck. "But she knows this stable by heart now, and she knows my voice." As if on cue, Luna nickered softly and nudged Helena's shoulder. "You talk to them like they're people," Artur said, something like wonder in his voice. Helena looked at him directly for the first time. Her eyes were a deep brown, steady and unflinching. "They are," she said simply. "They just don't know how to speak with their mouths." The words hit Artur like a physical blow. There was a truth in them that resonated deep inside him, touching something he'd long forgotten. Helena turned away, reaching for a bucket of feed. "Will you be staying long?" she asked, her back to him. "Just until the funeral. Then I'll be selling the ranch." Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn around. "I see. You don't approve," he said, strangely bothered by her reaction. "It's not my place to approve or disapprove. Morada Alta is yours now. But these horses will need to find somewhere else to go." Now she did turn, her eyes meeting his again. "I understand, Señor Mendonça. Business is business." There was no accusation in her voice, just a quiet resignation. That made him feel worse than if she'd yelled at him. "Where do you live?" he asked suddenly. The question seemed to surprise her. "Here," she said. "In the tack room." "Here? In the stable?" She nodded, a hint of defiance in her expression. "Your father allowed it. It makes it easier to care for the horses." Artur tried to imagine living in a tack room. The smell of leather and hay, the hard wooden floor, the lack of running water. "How long have you been at Morada Alta?" he asked. 3 years, Helena said, moving to another horse, a brown mare with a badly scarred leg. "And before that?" Her hands paused briefly in their work. "Before that doesn't matter," she said quietly. Artur recognized the wall when he saw it. Whatever Helena's past was, she didn't want to talk about it. He could respect that. He had his own past he'd rather not discuss. "Well," he said, suddenly uncomfortable, "I should get back to the house. Helena will worry." Helena nodded without looking at him. "Goodbye, Señor Mendonça." "Artur," he corrected automatically. "Just Artur." That earned him a quick glance. "Goodbye, Artur." As he walked back toward the main house, Artur couldn't shake. The image of Helena among the horses, the gentle way she touched them, the softness in her voice when she spoke to them. It was a kindness he hadn't seen in a long time. And those words, they just don't know how to speak with their mouths. What did that mean? That we all have something to say if only someone would listen. For the first time since arriving at Morada Alta, Artur felt something other than resentment and obligation. He felt curiosity. The funeral was exactly as Artur had expected, a parade of local ranchers and businessmen, most of whom Artur barely remembered, all claiming to have been Seu Norberto's dear friends. Helena cried. The ranch hands stood awkwardly in their best clothes. The priest spoke of a man Artur didn't recognize, kind, generous, loving. Helena didn't come. Artur found himself looking for her in the crowd, but she wasn't there. Afterward, back at the house, the lawyer presented Artur with his father's will. It was simple enough. Everything went to Artur, the ranch, the cattle, the accounts. There were no surprises until the very end. "There's one condition," the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. "Your father stipulated that you must live at Morada Alta for at least 6 months before you can sell." "What?" Artur stared at the man. "That's ridiculous. I have a life in São Paulo." The lawyer shrugged. "Those are the terms. 6 months or the ranch goes to your cousin Ricardo." Ricardo. Artur hadn't thought of his cousin in years. The son of his father's sister, Ricardo had always been the son Seu Norberto wished he had. Tough, good with cattle, comfortable with the ranch life. "This is my father's last joke," Artur said bitterly. "He knew I'd want to sell. This is his way of torturing me from the grave. Or perhaps," the lawyer suggested carefully, "it's his way of giving you a chance to know the ranch, to make an informed decision." Artur laughed harshly. "You didn't know my father very well if you think that. But there was no way around it. 6 months at Morada Alta or lose everything." And despite his complicated feelings about the ranch, Artur wasn't about to let it go to Ricardo. That night, alone in his childhood bedroom, Artur made a decision. He would stay the 6 months. He would learn enough about running the ranch to manage it from afar. Then he would sell it and never look back. But first he needed to know more about the woman in the stables, who talked to horses like they were people. Helena was washing Luna's blind eye with a damp cloth when she heard footsteps approaching. She knew without turning who it was. There was something distinctive about the way Artur walked, hesitant as if he wasn't sure he belonged here. "Good morning," he said, stopping at a respectful distance. Helena nodded, but didn't speak. She'd been avoiding the main house since hearing about Seu Norberto's death, unsure of her place now that Artur had returned. "I wanted to tell you," Artur continued. "I'll be staying at Morada Alta for a while. 6 months, at least." Now, Helena did turn surprised. "I thought you were selling." "I am eventually, but there are conditions in my father's will." He sounded annoyed about that, which made Helena almost smile. Seu Norberto controlling things even from the grave. "I see," she said, "and I wanted you to know that you and the horses can stay. For now." Helena felt a rush of relief so strong it almost made her dizzy. "Thank you," she said quietly. Artur shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Actually, I was hoping you might show me around the ranch today. It's been a long time since I've been here and things have changed. Helena stared at him. Wouldn't Diego be better for that, or one of the other hands? Probably, Artur admitted. But they all worked for my father. They expect me to know things already, to be like him. And you don't, Helena thought. You don't expect anything from me at all. All right, she said finally. Let me finish with Luna and I'll show you around. Artur smiled, and Helena was struck by how it transformed his face. Without the guarded expression he usually wore, he looked younger, almost boyish. Great, he said. I'll wait outside. As he walked away, Helena wondered what she was getting herself into. Artur Mendonça was nothing like his father, that much was clear. But that didn't mean he would keep Morada Alta once the 6 months were up, and when he sold, what would happen to her? To the horses? She pushed the thought away. 6 months was a long time. For now her horses were safe, that was all that mattered. Outside the morning sun was bright and warm. Artur stood waiting, his city clothes looking out of place against the backdrop of the ranch. We'll start with the north pastures, Helena said, heading toward the dirt road that led away from the stables. That's where most of the cattle are. Right now. Artur fell into step beside her. How many head of cattle does the ranch have these days? About 2,000. Seu Norberto sold off a lot last year when prices were high. They walked in silence for a while. Helena was aware of Artur glancing at her from time to time, curious. She kept her eyes on the road ahead. Can I ask you something? Artur said finally. Helena tensed. Here it comes, she thought, the questions about her past. Why do you care so much about those horses? They're old, sick. Most people would say they're not worth the trouble. The question surprised her. It wasn't what she'd expected. Because they still have value, she said after a moment. Not the kind you can measure in money, but value all the same. What kind of value? Helena thought about how to explain it to someone who might not understand. Every morning, Luna waits for me by her stall door. She can't see me coming, but she knows my footsteps. When I arrive, she makes this little happy sound, like she's been waiting all night just to hear my voice. She paused. That's a kind of value you can't put a price on. Artur was quiet for a long moment. I think I understand, he said finally, and somehow Helena believed him. They spent the morning touring the ranch, Helena pointing out improvements Seu Norberto had made, explaining the rotation of the herds between pastures, showing Artur the new well that had been dug last summer. As they walked, something unexpected happened. Helena found herself talking more than she had in years. There was something about Artur that made it easy. The way he listened, really listened, without judgment or expectation. By noon, they had circled back to the stables. Helena was surprised to realize she'd enjoyed the morning. Thank you, Artur said as they stopped at the stable door. This was helpful. Helena nodded, suddenly awkward now that the tour was over. You're welcome. Artur seemed reluctant to leave. Those horses, he said, gesturing toward the stables, they're lucky to have you. The simple compliment caught Helena off guard. I'm the lucky one, she said softly. They saved me. Not the other way around. She hadn't meant to say that. The words had slipped out before she could stop them. Artur's eyes met hers, curious and somehow kind. How did they save you? Helena looked away. It's a long story. I have time, Artur said, but Helena shook her head. Another day, maybe. To her relief, Artur didn't push. Another day, he agreed. As he walked back toward the main house, Helena watched him go. For the first time in 3 years, she'd let down her guard just a little. It should have frightened her, but somehow it didn't. Inside the stable, Luna nickered a greeting. Helena went to her, stroking the horse's soft muzzle. What do you think, girl? She whispered. Is he like his father after all? Luna snorted softly, pressing her head against Helena's hand. No, Helena answered her own question. No, I don't think he is. And for the first time in a long time, Helena felt something like hope stirring inside. Her days turned into weeks at Morada Alta. Artur settled into a routine he never thought possible. Each morning he woke early, had coffee with Helena, and then walked the grounds, learning the business of the ranch one day at a time. And each day, somehow, His steps always led him to the old stables. Helena never seemed surprised to see him. She would look up from whatever horse she was tending, nod a greeting and continue her work. Sometimes they talked about the ranch, about the horses. Sometimes they worked in comfortable silence. Artur found himself looking forward to these moments, more than he cared to admit. There was something about Helena that drew him to her, not just her beauty, though she was beautiful in a quiet, unassuming way, but something deeper, a strength that reminded him of the horses she loved. One morning, Artur arrived at the stables to find Helena looking worried, her hand resting on the neck of a large chestnut mare. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. Concerned. "It's Marta," Helena said, nodding toward the horse. "She's pregnant. The foal should come any day now, but something doesn't feel right." Artur moved closer, noticing the mare's labored breathing. "Do you need a vet?" Helena's face tightened. "Diego went to get Dr. Santos from town, but I'm not sure he'll make it in time." Artur felt helpless. "What can I do?" Helena looked at him, seeming to make a decision. "Stay with her. Talk to her. Keep her calm while I get some things ready." Artur swallowed hard. He knew nothing about horses, let alone pregnant ones, but Helena was already moving away, heading toward the tack room. Cautiously, he approached Marta. The mare's eyes were wide, with discomfort, her sides heaving. "Hey there," he said softly, feeling foolish. "Everything's going to be okay. Helena's going to take care of you." To his surprise, Marta seemed to respond to his voice. She turned her head toward him, her breathing slowing slightly. Encouraged, Artur kept talking. He told Marta about his life in São Paulo, about his failed design business, about how strange it felt to be back at Morada Alta. He told her things he hadn't told anyone, not even Helena. "My father never thought I was good enough," he admitted, quietly, stroking Marta's neck the way he'd seen Helena do. "Maybe he was right. I couldn't make it in the city either." "That's not true." Artur turned to find Helena standing behind him, arms full of clean towels and a metal box that looked like a first aid kit. "How long have you been there?" he asked, embarrassed. "Long enough," Helena said, setting her supplies down. "And your father was wrong. I've seen how you are with the horses, how you listen to them." "Listening is easy," Artur said. "It's knowing what to do that's hard." Helena's eyes met his. "Sometimes listening is the most important thing you can do." Before Artur could respond, Marta let out a distressed sound, her legs trembling. "It's starting," Helena said, all business now. "I need your help." For the next hour, Artur did whatever Helena asked, bringing water, holding towels, steadying Marta when she seemed ready to collapse. He watched in awe as Helena worked, her hands sure and gentle, her voice a constant soothing presence. "Come on, girl," she encouraged Marta. "You can do this." When the foal finally emerged, a tiny, wet creature with impossibly long legs, Artur felt tears in his eyes. He watched as Helena cleared the newborn's nose and mouth, her movements practiced and efficient. "He's beautiful," Artur whispered. As the foal took its first shuddering breath, Helena smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Yes, he is." Together they helped the wobbly foal to his feet, supporting him as he found his mother's milk for the first time. There was something magical about it, this new life, so fragile and yet so determined. "How did you know what to do?" Artur asked when both mother and baby were resting comfortably. Helena's smile faded. "I used to be a veterinarian," she said, quietly, the admission clearly costing her something. Artur stared at her in surprise. "A vet? But why am I living in a tack room taking care of unwanted horses?" Helena finished for him, her voice tight. "Like I said before, that's a long story." This time, Artur didn't back down. "I still have time," he said gently. Helena looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "Not today," she said, "but soon, I promise." It was more than she'd offered before, and Artur decided to be content with that. As they cleaned up, the skies outside darkened. By the time Dr. Santos arrived from town, fat raindrops were falling, and thunder rumbled in the distance. "Looks like we're in for a storm," the vet said as he examined Marta and her foal. "Good thing you were here, Helena. You did a fine job." Helena ducked her head at the praise. "They did most of the work," she said, gesturing to the horses. The vet turned to Artur. Your father would have sold this mare months ago. Too old for breeding, he would have said. I am not my father, Artur said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Dr. Santos raised his eyebrows. No, he agreed after a moment. Perhaps you're not. By the time the vet left, the storm had arrived in full force. Rain lashed against the stable walls and lightning flashed across the sky. Helena moved among the horses, speaking softly to calm them. I should get back to the house, Artur said. Though the thought of running through the downpour wasn't appealing, Helena nodded, but before either of them could say more, a tremendous crack of thunder shook the stable. Luna, the blind mare, reared. Up in terror, nearly knocking Helena over. Whoa, girl, Helena cried, trying to calm the frightened animal. It's okay. But Luna was beyond hearing. She kicked at her stall door, eyes rolling wildly. Without thinking, Artur moved to help. He approached Luna from the side, speaking in the same calm voice he'd used with Marta. Easy, Luna, he said. It's just a storm. You're safe. To his amazement, Luna responded. Her frantic movements slowed and she lowered her head, seeking the source of his voice. Helena stared at him, something like wonder in her expression. She trusts you, she said. Artur stroked Luna's neck, feeling a surge of unexpected pride. Maybe she just knows I'm as scared of storms as she is. Helena laughed, a sound Artur realized he hadn't heard nearly enough. I doubt that, she said. Luna's a good judge of character. The rain continued to pour, making it clear Artur wouldn't be leaving anytime soon. You might as well stay until it passes, Helena said, as if reading his thoughts. I'll make us some coffee. In the tack room, Artur was struck by the simplicity of Helena's living space. A narrow cot, a small table with two mismatched chairs, shelves lined with books and medicine bottles. Yet there was a hominess to it that the grand main house lacked. It's not much, Helena said, seeing his gaze, but it's enough. It's nice, Artur said and meant it. Reminds me of my apartment in São Paulo, actually, before things went bad. Helena handed him a chipped mug of coffee. What happened in São Paulo, she asked. If you don't mind me asking, Artur took a sip of coffee, gathering his thoughts. No one had asked him that question before. Not Helena, not the lawyer, not the ranch hands. They all assumed he'd failed because he wasn't tough enough, wasn't like his father. I had a design firm, he said finally. Interior design, mostly for offices and restaurants. We were doing well for a while. Then I took on a big client. Too big, really. We couldn't deliver what they wanted in the time they wanted it. They pulled out, sued for breach of contract. After that, other clients got nervous, started cancelling. Within 6 months, I was bankrupt. Helena listened without interruption, her eyes on his face. I'm sorry, she said when he finished. That must have been hard. The worst part was coming back here, Artur admitted, proving my father right after all these years. Is that what you think you've done? Helena asked, her voice gentle but challenging. Proved him right. Artur looked away. Haven't I? He always said I'd fail in the city, that I'd come crawling back to Morada Alta. And here I am. Here you are, Helena agreed, helping deliver a foal, calming a blind horse during a storm, learning a business you never wanted because it's your responsibility now. She paused. That doesn't sound like failure to me. Her words settled over Artur like a warm blanket. For the first time since returning to Morada Alta, he felt something shift inside him, a loosening of the knot of resentment and shame he'd carried for so long. Thank you, he said simply. Helena smiled, a little embarrassed. It's just the truth. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the rain drum on the roof and the occasional soft sounds from the horses. It was peaceful in a way Artur hadn't experienced in years. Can I ask you something? He said after a while. Helena tensed slightly. You can ask, I might not answer. Fair enough, Artur said. I was just wondering, why horses? Of all the animals you could work with as a vet, why them? The question seemed to surprise her. She relaxed a little, considering. My grandfather raised horses, she said finally. When I was a little girl, I spent every summer on his farm. He taught me that horses are like mirrors. They reflect back whatever you bring to them. Fear, anger, love, trust. They don't lie and they don't pretend. Unlike people, Artur said. Helena nodded. Unlike people. But you were a vet in the city, right? Not just for horses? I had a small animal practice, Helena confirmed. Dogs, cats, the occasional bird or rabbit. Do you miss it? Artur asked. Gently, Helena's face closed up. No, she said firmly, I don't. Artur knew he'd hit a wall again. Whatever had driven Helena from her practice to this isolated life at Morada Alta was still too painful for her to share. The rain's letting up, he said, changing the subject. I should probably head back before Helena sends out a search party. Helena nodded, relief visible in her eyes. Of course. As Artur stood to leave, he found himself reluctant to go. There was something about this small room, with its smell of leather and hay, that felt more like home than the grand house where he'd grown up. Will you be at the main house for dinner tonight? He asked. Elena's been asking about you. Helena shook her head. I don't really go up there, she said, but thank Helena for me. You could start, Artur suggested. Going up there, I mean. Things are different now. Helena looked uncertain. Maybe someday. It wasn't a no, and Artur decided to count that as progress. Outside, the rain had indeed slowed to a gentle drizzle. The air smelled fresh and clean, and a rainbow arched across the eastern sky. Beautiful, Helena said, stepping out to stand beside him. Yes, Artur agreed, but he wasn't looking at the rainbow. Helena caught his gaze and blushed slightly. You should go, she said softly, before it starts raining again. Artur nodded but didn't move. There was something he needed to say, something that had been growing clearer with each day he spent at Morada Alta. I'm not going to sell the ranch, he said. Helena's eyes widened. What? But I thought... So did I, Artur admitted. But things change. People change. He looked back at the stable, where Marta and her new foal rested peacefully. Some things are worth keeping, even if they're not what you expected. Helena's expression was unreadable. Are you sure? This is a big decision. I'm sure, Artur said, and realized it was true. Somewhere in these past weeks, Morada Alta had stopped being his father's ranch and had started becoming his. I still have a lot to learn, though. You're doing better than you think, Helena said quietly. Artur smiled at her. I have a good teacher. As he walked back to the main house, Artur felt lighter than he had in years. The decision not to sell. Morada Alta had been building for weeks, but it wasn't until he saw Helena with that newborn foal that he knew for certain. This was where he belonged. Not because his father had wanted it, but because he had found something here worth staying. For the news that Artur Mendonça was keeping Morada Alta spread quickly through the ranch and the nearby town. Most people were surprised. So Norberto's city son had never seemed interested in ranch life before. But the ranch hands who worked closely with Artur saw the change in him. He listened to their advice, learned from their experience, and treated them with a respect his father had never shown. He's not like the old man at all, Diego told Helena one afternoon as they unloaded feed for the horses. Seu Norberto would have fired João last week when that fence wasn't fixed on time, but Senor Artur just asked what happened, then helped him finish the job. Helena nodded, not surprised. She had seen Artur's kindness firsthand, had watched him gain the trust of horses that shied away from most people. He's a good man, she said simply. Diego gave her a knowing look. You two spend a lot of time together. Helena busied herself with a bag of feed. He's interested in the horses, she said, ignoring the heat in her cheeks. The horses, Diego repeated, grinning. Of course. Helena changed the subject, but Diego's words stayed with her. It was true that she and Artur had been spending more time together, not just at the stables, but riding the boundaries of the property, checking on the cattle, even having dinner together occasionally when Elena insisted Helena join them at the main house. It was a friendship, Helena told herself. Nothing more. She had no room in her life for anything else, not with her past, not with the secret she still carried. But sometimes, when Artur looked at her a certain way, or when their hands brushed accidentally as they worked side by side, Helena felt something stir inside her that she had thought long dead. It frightened her. And yet, "You're being ridiculous," she muttered to herself as she filled Luna's water trough. "He's the owner of Morada Alta. You're just the weird woman who lives in his stable." Luna snorted as if disagreeing. "Oh, what do you know?" Helena said, but she patted the horse affectionately. Later that afternoon, Helena came to the stable, a rare occurrence. The housekeeper had always been kind to Helena, but she rarely ventured beyond the main house and gardens. "Helena," Helena called, looking somewhat out of place in her neat dress. "Do you have a moment?" Helena set down the brush she'd been using on Estrella. "Of course, Helena. Is everything all right?" "Yes, yes," Helena said, waving a hand dismissively. "I just wanted to invite you to dinner tonight. We're having a small celebration for Senor Artur. It's his birthday." Helena stared at her. "His birthday? He didn't mention it." Helena sniffed. "Of course not. Men never do. But I remembered, and I'm making his favorite dish, feijoada, just like his mother used to make." Her eyes softened at the mention of Artur's mother. "Poor boy hasn't had a proper birthday celebration in years, I bet." Helena hesitated. A dinner at the main house, with Helena and probably some of the other ranch staff, was one thing. A birthday. Celebration felt more intimate, more significant. "I don't know, Helena," she began. "Nonsense," Helena cut her off. "You must come. Senor Artur would want you there." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "He talks about you, you know, all the time." Helena felt her cheeks grow warm. "He does?" Helena smiled knowingly. 7 o'clock. Don't be late." As the housekeeper walked away, Helena realized she had a problem. She had nothing to wear to a birthday dinner. Her wardrobe consisted of work clothes, jeans, t-shirts, boots, all practical for life in the stables, none suitable for a celebration. For the first time in years, Helena found herself wishing for some of the clothes she'd left behind in her old life. The dresses and skirts that had hung unworn in her closet since she'd come to Morada Alta. In the end, she did the best she could with what she had. Her cleanest jeans, a blue blouse she'd nearly forgotten she owned, her hair loose instead of in its usual practical ponytail. Looking at her reflection in the small mirror in the tack room, Helena barely recognized herself. She looked softer somehow, less like the woman who had been hiding from the world for 3 years, and more like the person she used to be. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. At exactly 7 o'clock, Helena knocked on the back door of the main house. Helena opened it immediately as if she'd been waiting. "You came," she exclaimed, pulling Helena inside. "And look at you, so pretty." Helena smiled awkwardly. "Thank you for inviting me." The kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of Helena's cooking. Through the doorway to the dining room, Helena could see a table set for dinner, candles already lit. "Where is everyone?" she asked, confused. She had expected other ranch hands, maybe even Dr. Santos. Helena busied herself at the stove. "Oh, it's just you and Senor Artur tonight," she said too casually. "More intimate that way." Helena stared at her. "Helena, did you—" "Helena?" She turned to see Artur standing in the doorway, looking as surprised as she felt. He was dressed, more formally than usual, in dark pants and a white shirt that emphasized the tan he'd developed from weeks of outdoor work. "Happy birthday," Helena said, feeling suddenly shy. Artur glanced at Helena, who was humming innocently at the stove. "You didn't tell me Helena was coming," he said to the housekeeper. "Didn't I?" Helena replied, all wide-eyed innocence. "My mistake. Now both of you go sit down. Dinner is ready." As they moved to the dining room, Artur leaned close to Helena. "I think we've been set up," he whispered, amusement in his voice. Helena couldn't help but smile. "I think you're right." Despite the initial awkwardness, dinner was lovely. Helena's feijoada was delicious, and the wine Artur opened was even better. They talked easily about the ranch, about the horses, about Artur's plans for Morada Alta now that he'd decided to stay. "I want to expand the horse program," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "Not just the rescue work you're doing, but maybe breeding, training. There's good money in it if done right." Helena listened, touched that he saw value in her work with the horses. "That sounds wonderful," she said sincerely. After dinner, Helena shooed them onto the veranda with coffee and a small chocolate cake. The night was clear and cool, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. I have something for you, Helena said, reaching into her pocket. It's not much, but... She handed Artur a small package wrapped in brown paper. Artur looked surprised. You didn't have to get me anything. Open it, Helena urged. Inside was a braided leather bracelet, simple but elegant. I made it, Helena explained, from an old bridle that couldn't be repaired. The silver bit in the middle is from Luna's first halter. Artur ran his fingers over the bracelet, visibly moved. This is... Thank you, Helena. This means a lot. He slipped it onto his wrist, where it looked as if it had always belonged. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking their coffee and watching the stars. Helena couldn't remember the last time she had felt so at peace. You know, Artur said eventually, when I first came back to Morada Alta, I was so angry. At my father, at this place, at myself for failing in São Paulo. He looked at her. I never expected to find happiness here. Helena's heart beat faster at the implication in his words. And have you? She asked softly. Found happiness? Artur's answer was in his eyes, warm and certain as they met hers. I'm getting closer every day. It would have been so easy to lean toward him then, to close the small distance between them. Part of Helena wanted to, the part that had been lonely for so long, the part that saw in Artur something she had never expected to find at Morada Alta. But the other part, the part that still woke up sweating from nightmares about a little girl's face, held her back. Artur, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There are things about me you don't know, things that would change how you see me. Artur reached out, his fingers lightly touching hers on the arm of the chair. Nothing could change how I see you, Helena. You can't know that, she said, pulling her hand away. You don't know what I've done. Artur's expression was gentle but determined. Then tell me. Helena took a deep breath. It was time. She had been running from her past for 3 years, but sitting here with Artur, she suddenly knew she couldn't run anymore. I was a veterinarian in Belo Horizonte, she began, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. I had a good practice, a nice apartment. I was engaged to another vet, Carlos. We worked together. Artur listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving her face. One day a woman brought in her daughter's puppy. It was very sick, vomiting, lethargic. The woman was hysterical, saying her daughter would be devastated if anything happened. To it, Helena's voice faltered. I diagnosed a simple intestinal blockage, common in puppies. I scheduled surgery for the next morning. Helena closed her eyes, remembering. But that night the woman called again. The puppy was worse, much worse. I told her to bring it in immediately, but by the time she arrived, Helena swallowed hard. It was too late. The puppy died. I'm sorry, Artur said quietly. But Helena, puppies die sometimes. It wasn't your fault. Helena shook her head. That's not the end of the story, she said. 2 days later, the woman's daughter was brought to the hospital. She was in a coma. Somehow she had contracted the same infection that killed the puppy. An infection I should have recognized, should have treated immediately. Now the tears came, hot and stinging. She died, Artur. She died because I misdiagnosed her puppy, because I wasn't careful enough, wasn't thorough enough. Artur's face showed shock, then deep compassion. Helena. But she couldn't stop now. There was an investigation. They found that I hadn't ordered the right tests, hadn't recognized the symptoms of a zoonotic infection. My license was suspended pending review. Her voice broke. But I didn't wait for the review. I couldn't face. The girl's mother couldn't face Carlos or my colleagues. I just left. Changed my name slightly. Came here where no one knew me, where I could just disappear. Silence fell between them. Helena felt both relief and terror. Relief at finally sharing her secret. Terror at what Artur would think of her now. So now, you know, she said finally, wiping away tears. I'm not the person you think I am. I'm a coward who ran away from her mistakes, who couldn't face the consequences of her actions. Artur was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Helena's surprise, he moved from his chair to kneel in front of her, taking her hands in his. Helena, he said, his voice gentle but firm. What happened was a tragedy, a terrible, heartbreaking tragedy, but it was an accident. You didn't intend for that child to get sick. Intent doesn't matter, Helena said bitterly. She's still dead. Yes, it does matter, Artur insisted. It matters enormously. You made a mistake, a human mistake, and you've been punishing yourself for 3 years. He squeezed her hands. Look at what you've done since coming here. How many animals have you saved? How many lives have you made? Better, including mine? Helena looked into his eyes, wanting desperately to believe him. It doesn't erase what happened, she whispered. No, Artur agreed. Nothing can erase it. But maybe it's time to stop running, to face what happened and find a way to live with it. Helena felt something crack inside her, the hard shell of guilt and shame she had built around herself since leaving Belo Horizonte. I don't know if I can, she admitted. You don't have to do it alone, Artur said softly. And in that moment, with the stars shining above them and Artur's hands warm around hers, Helena allowed herself to hope. Not for forgiveness, she wasn't sure she would ever forgive herself, but for the possibility of a future beyond her past. Thank you, she whispered. Artur smiled, a smile full of promise and understanding. Happy birthday to me, he said lightly, breaking the tension. Helena laughed through her tears. Yes, she agreed. Happy birthday, Artur. As they sat together under the night sky, Helena felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time, the feeling of coming home. Morning light filtered through the stable windows as Helena finished her rounds. 2 months had passed since Artur's birthday, since the night she had finally shared her secret with him. She had expected everything to change after that confession, had braced herself for judgment or worse, pity. Instead, something beautiful had grown between them, a trust that deepened with each passing day. Artur had not pushed her to get over what had happened, had not offered empty platitudes about forgiveness. He had simply been there, steady and patient, giving her the space to heal at her own pace. Good morning, his voice came from the stable, jaw as familiar now as the sounds of the horses waking. Helena turned, unable to stop the smile that spread across her face. You're early today. Artur crossed to where she stood, bringing with him the scent of coffee and the outdoors. He was dressed for work in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, so different from the city clothes he'd worn when he first arrived at Morada Alta. I wanted to see you before the meeting, he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek, a gesture that had become natural between them, though they had not yet crossed the line into something more intimate. Meeting? Helena asked, enjoying the brief warmth of his nearness. With the bank, Artur explained. About the loan for the new breeding program. Helena nodded, remembering. Artur had been working for weeks on a plan to expand Morada Alta's operations to include horse breeding and training, with a special focus on therapy horses, animals trained to work with children and adults with disabilities. Are you nervous? She asked. Artur smiled wryly, terrified, but also excited. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. None of this would be happening without you, you know. Helena shook her head. This is all you, Artur. Your vision, your work. Inspired by you, he insisted, by watching you with these horses. Before Helena could respond, Diego appeared at the stable door. Senor Artur, the truck with the new feed shipment is here. They need you to sign for it. Artur nodded. I'll be right there. He turned back to Helena. Wish me luck for the meeting. You don't need luck, she said, but good luck anyway. He squeezed her hand once more before leaving, and Helena found herself watching him go, a familiar warmth spreading through her chest. What was happening between them still frightened her sometimes, the vulnerability of caring for someone again after closing her heart for so long, but it was a sweet kind of fear, full of possibility. Helena returned to her work, humming softly as she moved among the horses. In the months since Artur had decided to keep Morada Alta, the old stable had undergone a transformation. New stalls had been built, the roof repaired, proper lighting installed. There were now 12 rescued horses in her care, with room for more. And Helena herself had changed too. She still lived in the tack room, despite Artur's gentle suggestions that she might be more comfortable in the main house, but the space had been renovated. with a proper bathroom added and the drafty walls insulated. More than the physical changes, though, Helena felt herself opening up to life again. She had begun helping Dr. Santos with some of his cases, using her veterinary knowledge in small ways. She had even called her parents, breaking the silence of 3 years to let them know she was okay. She hadn't yet found the courage to contact the mother of the little girl who had died. That wound was still too raw, too deep. But for the first time, Helena could imagine a future where she might be strong enough to face that final reckoning. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up outside the stable, an unfamiliar sound as most visitors to Morada. Artur went directly to the main house. Curious, Helena stepped outside to see a sleek black car parked in the dirt yard. A man in an expensive suit emerged, looking around with an expression of distaste, as if the very air of the ranch offended him. "Can I help you?" Helena called, approaching cautiously. The man turned, his gaze sharp and assessing. "I'm looking for Artur Mendonça," he said crisply. "I was told I might find him here." There was something about the man that put Helena on edge, something cold and calculating in his eyes. "He's at the main house," she said. "If you follow the road up the hill, you'll see it." The man made no move to leave. Instead, he looked Helena up and down, taking in her work clothes and boots. "And you are?" "Helena Silva," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "I work with the horses." A flicker of recognition crossed the man's face. "Silva," he repeated. "From Belo Horizonte?" Helena felt the blood drain from her face. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ricardo Mendonça," he said smoothly. "Artur's cousin, and you, my dear, are quite a long way from home." Helena's heart pounded in her chest. Ricardo, the cousin who would have inherited Morada Alta if Artur had sold, the cousin who now stood looking at her like a predator who had just spotted prey. "What do you want?" Helena asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Ricardo's smile widened. "Just a friendly visit with my cousin. We have business to discuss." He glanced around at the renovated stable. "He seems to be making quite a few changes here, investing a lot of money." "It's his ranch," Helena said simply. "For now," Ricardo agreed, his tone making the words sound like a threat. "Well, I won't keep you from your work. Please tell Artur I'll be waiting for him at the house." As he turned to go, Ricardo paused. "Oh, and Miss Silva? Or should I say, Dr. Silva? We'll be seeing each other again soon, I'm sure." Helena watched him drive away, her hands shaking. He knew. Somehow Ricardo knew who she was, knew about her past. And from the look in his eyes, he intended to use that information. She needed to warn Artur, needed to tell him that his cousin was here and that he knew about her. But Artur was already gone, headed to town for his meeting with the bank. And Helena had no way to reach him. Artur returned to Morada Alta late that afternoon, his spirits high. The meeting with the bank had gone even better than he'd hoped. The loan had been approved, and he could begin implementing his plans for the breeding program immediately. He couldn't wait to tell Helena. He had even stopped in town to buy a small celebration, a bottle of good wine and chocolates from the fancy shop that had recently opened. But as he drove up to the main house, he saw a car he didn't recognize parked out front. Visitors were rare at Morada Alta, especially unexpected ones. Helena met him at the door, her expression troubled. "Your cousin is here," she said without preamble. "Ricardo. He's been waiting for hours." Artur's good mood evaporated. He hadn't seen Ricardo in years, not since before he left for São Paulo. Their relationship had always been strained, Ricardo openly contemptuous of Artur's sensitivity, Artur wary of his cousin's naked ambition. "Where is he?" Artur asked. "In your father's study," Helena said, the disapproval clear in her voice. "He made himself at home." Artur took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever was coming. "Has he said what he wants?" Helena shook her head. "No, but he was asking questions about you, about the ranch, about Helena." Artur frowned. "Helena? How does he even know about her?" "I don't know," Helena said, "but I don't like it. He has that look your father used to get when he was planning something." With a growing sense of unease, Artur made his way to the study. The door was open, and Ricardo sat behind the massive desk that had once been Seu Norberto's, examining papers that Artur recognized as the ranch's financial records. "Making yourself comfortable, I see," Artur said from the doorway. Ricardo looked up, a smile spreading across his face that didn't touch his eyes. "Cousin, it's been too long." He rose to embrace Artur, who returned the gesture stiffly. Up close, Ricardo looked exactly as Artur remembered, handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with the same dark eyes as Seu Norberto. "What brings you to Morada Alta?" Artur asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Ricardo returned to the desk, gesturing for Artur to take a seat across from him. "I heard you've decided to keep the ranch." Quite a surprise, considering how eager. "You were to leave all those years ago." "People change," Artur said simply. "Do they?" Ricardo's smile was knowing. "Or do they just find new motivations?" There was something in his tone that put Artur on alert. "What are you really doing here, Ricardo?" His cousin leaned back in the chair, Seu Norberto's chair, with the air of a man who held all the cards. "I came to make you an offer," he said. "I want to buy Morada Alta." Artur shook his head. "It's not for sale." "Everything is for sale," Ricardo countered, "at the right price, and I'm prepared to be very generous." "I'm not interested," Artur said firmly. "Now, if that's all—" "It's not all," Ricardo cut him off. "I think you should hear my full offer before making a decision, especially considering your situation." "What situation?" Artur asked, his unease growing. Ricardo pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the desk. "Open it," he said. With a sense of dread, Artur did. Inside was a collection of newspaper clippings, official documents, and photographs. His blood ran cold as he realized what he was looking at. The story of Helena's past laid out in black and white. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, his voice tight with anger. Ricardo shrugged. "I have friends in Belo Horizonte. When I heard about your new friend, I got curious, started asking questions." His smile turned cruel. "Imagine my surprise when I discovered the woman living in your stable is actually a disgraced veterinarian responsible for the death of a child." Artur slammed the folder shut. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. But Ricardo wasn't finished. "The mother of that little girl has been looking for Helena Silva for 3 years, he continued, as if Artur hadn't spoken. "She never got closure, you see. Never got to confront the woman who killed her daughter." "It was an accident," Artur said through clenched teeth. "A tragic accident. Was it?" Ricardo asked, his eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "That's not how the mother sees it, and I doubt that's how the local community would see it if they knew who was living among them." The threat was clear. "What do you want, Ricardo?" Artur asked, though he already knew the answer. His cousin spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. "Like I said, I want to buy Morada Alta. For a very fair price." He paused. "And in return, this information stays private. Your Helena remains undisturbed. Everyone wins." Artur stared at his cousin, a cold fury building inside him. This was blackmail, pure and simple, using Helena's pain, her trauma, as leverage. "I need time to think," he said finally, knowing that an outright refusal would only push Ricardo to make good on his threat immediately. Ricardo nodded, satisfied. "Of course, take all the time you need." He stood, gathering his briefcase. "I'll be staying in town for a few days. Call me when you've made your decision." At the door he paused. "Oh, and Artur, I wouldn't discuss this with Helena if I were you. It would be a shame to upset her unnecessarily, especially if you make the right choice." After Ricardo left, Artur sat motionless in the study, the folder still on the desk in front of him. His mind raced, trying to find a way out of the trap his cousin had set. He could refuse to sell, of course, but then Ricardo would make sure everyone knew about Helena's past. The story would spread through the town like wildfire, reigniting the pain and shame that Helena had carried for 3 years. Or he could sell Morada Alta, the ranch he had come to love, the home he had finally found, and protect Helena from having to face her past before she was ready. Neither choice was acceptable. There had to be another way. With a sudden decision, Artur grabbed the folder and his car keys. There was one person who might be able to help him figure this out. Dr. Santos had been the veterinarian at Morada Alta for over 20 years. He had known Artur since he was a boy, had seen him leave for the city and return a changed man. And, in recent months, he had watched with approval as Artur and Helena grew closer. Now, sitting in the vet's small office on the edge of town, Artur explained the situation. Dr. Santos listened without interruption, his weathered face grave. "So that's her story," he said when Artur finished. "I always knew there was something she was running from, something more than just a career setback." "You're not surprised?" Artur asked. Dr. Santos shook his head. "I recognized her training from the start. The way she handled the horses, the medical knowledge she couldn't quite hide." He sighed. And there was a sadness in her eyes that spoke of real trauma. "I need your advice," Artur said. "If Ricardo makes this public, it will destroy her. She's only just starting to heal." The old vet was quiet for a long moment. "Do you love her?" he asked finally. The question caught Artur off guard, but the answer came without hesitation. "Yes," he said simply. "I do." "Then tell her the truth," Dr. Santos said. "All of it. Show her the folder. Let her decide what to do." Ricardo said, "I don't give a damn what Ricardo said." The vet cut him off. "This is Helena's past, Helena's pain. She has the right to face it on her terms, not his." Artur knew he was right, but the thought of causing Helena more pain was almost unbearable. "What if she runs again?" he asked, voicing his deepest fear. "What if this pushes her away for good?" Dr. Santos's expression softened. "That's a risk you'll have to take," he said gently. "If you try to protect her by making this decision without her, you'll lose her anyway. Trust her strength, Artur. She's survived this long." Artur nodded, his resolve hardening. "Thank you," he said, rising to leave. "One more thing," Dr. Santos called as Artur reached the door. "Whatever happens with Ricardo, with the ranch, don't let her go without a fight." The evening shadows were lengthening when Artur returned to Morada Alta. He drove straight to the stables, the folder on the seat beside him, his heart heavy with what he had to do. But when he arrived, Helena wasn't there. In her place was Diego, feeding the horses their evening meal. "Where's Helena?" Artur asked, a flicker of alarm rising in his chest. Diego looked uncomfortable. "She left," he said. "About an hour ago. She took her bag and asked me to look after the horses for a while." "Left?" Artur repeated, his alarm growing. "Did she say where she was going or why?" Diego shook his head. "No, senor. She just seemed upset. Said she needed some time." A cold fear gripped Artur. Had Ricardo gone to Helena despite his promise not to? Had he threatened her directly? "Was anyone else here today?" he demanded. "Did anyone speak to her?" "No one. Except me," Diego said. "But—" He hesitated. "But what?" Artur pressed. "She was in the tack room for a long time. When she came out, she was carrying this." Diego reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She asked me to give it to you." Artur took the paper with trembling hands. It was Helena's veterinary license, the one she had kept hidden all this time. And attached to it was a note. "Artur, I saw Ricardo today. He didn't have to say much for me to understand why he's here. I won't let my past hurt you or Morada Alta. You've worked too hard to make this place what it is now. I'm going back to Belo Horizonte. It's time I faced what I did, whatever the consequences. Please don't try to find me. This is something I need to do alone. Take care of the horses, especially Luna. She'll miss me, but she trusts you now." Helena Artur read the note twice, his heart sinking with each word. She was gone, running again, but this time not away from her past, toward it, and she had asked him not to follow. For a moment he stood frozen, torn between respecting her wishes and racing after her. But then Dr. Santos's words came back to him. "Don't let her go without a fight." "Diego," he said, his decision made, "I need you to take care of things here for a few days. I'm going to Belo Horizonte." "Yes, senor," Diego said, relief visible on his face. "Bring her back, yes? The horses need her." He paused. "And so do you." Artur nodded, already heading for his car. Helena had several hours head start, but he knew where she was going and he knew why. Ricardo had forced her hand, made her feel she had no choice but to confront her past before she was ready. And she was facing it alone because she thought she was protecting Artur and Morada Alta, but she was wrong. They were stronger together than apart, and whatever she had to face in Belo Horizonte, Artur was determined she wouldn't face it alone. As he drove through the gathering darkness, his thoughts turned to the horses back at Morada Alta, especially to one, not Luna or Marta or any of Helena's rescues, but an old gelding named Tempest that had been his father's favorite mount. Tempest was 25 years old now, arthritic and cantankerous. Seu Norberto had kept him only out of a sense of obligation, stabled separately from the other horses, cared for but not loved. When Artur returned to Morada Alta, he had been shocked to see how thin and dull-eyed the once proud horse had become. Helena had wanted to move him to the old stables with her rescues, but Artur had resisted. Tempest represented everything about his father that Artur had tried to leave behind: the coldness, the rigid expectations, the distance. "He's still your father's horse," Helena had said, not understanding Artur's reluctance. Not a rescue. But looking at Tempest, Artur had seen himself, the boy who had never been good enough, never tough enough for Seu Norberto, the boy who had been kept separate, cared for but not loved. Now racing toward Belo Horizonte to find Helena, Artur made another decision. When they returned, and they would return together, he would move Tempest to the old stables. It was time to heal. That wound too. The road stretched out before him, dark and winding, but Artur wasn't afraid. For the first time in his life, he knew exactly where he was going. Helena sat on a bench in the small park across from her old veterinary clinic in Belo Horizonte. The building looked the same as it had 3 years ago, the blue and white sign, the large windows, the plants in the waiting room visible from the street, but everything else had changed. The name on the sign was different: Santos Animal Hospital instead of Silva Veterinary Clinic. And Helena herself was different too. She had arrived in the city late the night before, checking into a small hotel near the clinic. She hadn't called ahead, hadn't warned anyone she was coming. She wasn't even sure what she planned to do. Confront her past, yes, but how? The answer had come to her as she sat watching the clinic open for the day's business. There was one person she needed to see, one conversation she needed to have before anything else: Maria Rocha, the mother of the little girl who had died. Finding her address wasn't difficult. Helena had memorized it 3 years ago, had written countless letters of apology that she'd never sent. Now as she stood outside the modest apartment building where Maria lived, Helena felt a terror, unlike anything she'd ever known. But she had come too far to turn back now. The woman who answered the door was thinner than Helena remembered, with streaks of grey in her dark hair that hadn't been there before. Her eyes widened in shock as she recognized Helena. "You," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Donna Maria," Helena said, her throat dry. "May I come in? Please, I need to talk to you." For a long moment, Helena thought the woman would refuse, would slam the door in her face. But then silently Maria stepped aside. The apartment was small but neat, with photographs covering one wall. Helena's eyes were drawn immediately to a picture of a smiling little girl with her arms around a puppy. Luisa and the puppy that had brought them all to this moment. "Why are you here?" Maria asked, her voice hard. "After 3 years, why now?" Helena took a deep breath. "Because I've been a coward," she said simply. "Because I ran away instead of facing what I did. Because you deserve better than that." Maria's expression didn't soften, but she gestured for Helena to sit. "So talk," she said, and Helena did. She told Maria everything about her mistake, her flight, her years at Morada Alta. She talked about the horses that had saved her, about Artur who had shown her it was possible to move beyond the past without forgetting it. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Helena finished, tears streaming down her face. "I know I don't deserve that, but I wanted you to know that not a day goes by that I don't think of Luisa, that I don't wish I could change what happened." Maria was silent for a long time after Helena finished speaking. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and controlled. "Do you know what the hardest part has been?" she asked. "Not just losing Luisa, though that pain never ends. It was not understanding, not having answers, Her eyes met Helena's. "You disappeared, the clinic closed, everyone told me different stories about what happened, and all I wanted was to look you in the eye and ask why." "I'm so sorry," Helena whispered. "Sorry doesn't bring her back," Maria said sharply. Then, more softly, "But neither does hate. I've learned that much in 3 years." She rose and went to the wall of photographs, touching Louise's picture gently. "My daughter loved animals," she said. "That's why we got the puppy. She wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up." A sad smile touched her lips. She would have been good at it. She had such a gentle way with creatures. Helena couldn't speak, her throat too tight with emotion. Maria turned back to her. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said honestly. "I don't know if I ever will be, but I'm glad you came. I needed to see that you've suffered too, that you haven't forgotten her." "I never could," Helena said. As she left the apartment, Helena felt lighter somehow. Not forgiven, Maria had been clear about that, but no longer running, no longer hiding. She spent the rest of the day walking the streets of Belo Horizonte, revisiting the places that had once been part of her daily life: her old apartment building, the cafe where she used to have breakfast, the park where she had walked her own dog, Beto, who now lived with her parents. As evening fell, she found herself back at the bench across from the clinic. She wasn't sure what to do next. Go back to Morada Alta, stay here and try to rebuild some kind of life. In the city, the future stretched before her, uncertain but no longer darkened by the shadow of her secret. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the figure approaching until he sat down beside her. "It took me 3 veterinary clinics and 2 hotels to find you," Artur said. "You might have left a better clue than just Belo Horizonte." Helena stared at him, too shocked to speak. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and stubble on his jaw, but his smile was as warm as ever. "What are you doing here?" she asked when she found her voice. "I told you not to follow me." "You did," Artur agreed, "but I've been very good at following instructions. Just ask my father." Despite everything, Helena felt a smile tugging at her lips. "Artur, no, let me speak," he interrupted gently. "You left because you thought you were protecting me. Protecting Morada Alta from your past." He took her hand. "But don't you see? Morada Alta isn't just land and buildings, it's the home we've been building together. Ricardo knows about me," Helena said. "He'll use it to force you to sell. Let him try," Artur said, a fierce determination in his voice. "I'm not afraid of him or his threats, and you shouldn't be either." He pulled her close, and Helena let herself be held, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "I went to see Maria Rocha today," she said quietly. "Luisa's mother." Artur drew back enough to look at her face. "How was it?" "Hard," Helena admitted, "but necessary. She didn't forgive me, I didn't expect her to, but we talked, really talked." Artur brushed a strand of hair from her face. "That was brave," he said. "I don't feel brave," Helena said. I don't know, like I've been holding my breath for 3 years, and I'm finally learning to breathe again." "Come home with me," Artur said, his voice soft but urgent. "Not because you're hiding. Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because Morada Alta is where you belong. Where we belong." Helena looked into his eyes and saw the future she hadn't dared to imagine. A life with Artur, with the horses, with purpose and love and, yes, even joy. A life where her past was part of her story, but not its ending. "What about Ricardo?" she asked. "He won't give up easily." Artur's smile was confident. "Let me worry about Ricardo. I have a few ideas. Ideas that don't involve selling Morada Alta. The only way Ricardo gets Morada Alta is over my dead body," Artur said firmly. "And I'm planning to live a very long time. With you, if you'll have me." Helena felt tears welling in her eyes, but for once they weren't tears of sadness or regret. "I'll have you," she whispered. As they sat together on the bench, the first stars appearing in the sky above Belo Horizonte, Helena felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She had faced her darkest fear and survived, and she wasn't alone anymore. Tomorrow, they would return to Morada Alta, together to face whatever came next. "There's something I need to tell you," Artur said suddenly. "About Tempest." Helena looked at him, surprised by the change of subject. Your father's horse? What about him? When we get back, Artur said, I want to move him to the old stables. With your rescues. Helena understood immediately what this meant, that Artur was finally letting go of the last piece of resentment he held toward his father. He'll like that, she said softly. He's been lonely too long. Artur nodded, his eyes reflecting the starlight. Seems to be a lot of that going around, he said, but not anymore. And as his lips found hers in a kiss that felt like coming home, Helena knew he was right. The loneliness was over, for both of them. The morning sun cast long shadows across Morada Alta as Artur and Helena returned from Belo Horizonte. The familiar sight of the ranch spreading out before them felt different now. Not just a place, but a promise. A future they would build together. Helena was waiting at the main house, her face lighting up when she saw them both. Thank God, she said, embracing Helena. I was so worried when you disappeared like that. I'm sorry, Helena said, returning the housekeeper's hug. I thought I was doing the right thing. Helena pulled back to look at her. The right thing is rarely the easy thing, she said with the wisdom of her years. But you're home now. That's what matters, home. The word settled in Helena's heart like a warm ember. For so long, she had thought of the old stable as just a hiding place, a temporary shelter until her past caught up with her. Now, with her secret exposed and her conscience beginning to heal, she could finally allow herself to call Morada Alta home. Ricardo was here again yesterday, Helena said, her expression darkening. Looking for you, Artur. He seemed angry when you weren't here. Artur nodded, his jaw set. I expected that. Is he still in town? At the hotel, from what I heard, Helena confirmed. What does he want? He keeps talking about buying the ranch, but I told him Morada Alta isn't for sale. It's not that simple, Artur said, glancing at Helena. But don't worry, I'll handle... Ricardo? Helena looked between them, sensing there was more to the story, but she didn't press. There's coffee and breakfast waiting, she said instead. You both look like you could use it. After breakfast, Artur and Helena walked together to the old stables. Helena was anxious to check on the horses, especially Luna, who had never been, separated from her for so long before. The blind mare whinnied with joy at the sound of Helena's voice, pressing her muzzle against Helena's shoulder in greeting. I missed you too, girl, Helena whispered, fighting back tears. All the horses seemed well cared for. Diego had done a good job in her absence. But Helena could tell they had missed her. Animals, unlike people, didn't hide their feelings behind polite facades or careful words. Their joy at her return was as honest as their dependence on her care. As she moved from stall to stall, greeting each horse, Helena felt Artur's eyes on her. He leaned against the stable door, watching with a soft smile. What? She asked, catching his gaze. I was just thinking, he said, about the first time I saw you here, talking to Luna like she could understand every word. Helena smiled at the memory. She can, she said simply, just not with her ears. Artur crossed to where she stood, taking her hands in his. I learned that from you, he said quietly. How to listen with more than just my ears. How to see with more than just my eyes. Helena felt her heart swell with emotion. Before she could respond, however, the sound of a car approaching broke the moment. Through the stable door, they could see Ricardo's sleek black car pulling up. Artur's cousin emerged, his expensive suit exchanged for more casual clothes, but his expression still cold and calculating. Stay here, Artur said to Helena. Let me talk to him alone. Helena caught his arm. No, she said firmly. Whatever. He has to say we face it together. Artur hesitated, then nodded. Together they walked out to meet Ricardo. Well, well, Ricardo said, his eyes moving from Artur to Helena. The runaways return. I was beginning to think you'd fled for good. What do you want, Ricardo? Artur asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Ricardo's smile was sharp. The same thing I wanted before. Morada Alta. He looked at Helena. I assume my cousin has told you about our conversation? About the information I have? He has, Helena said, lifting her chin. And it doesn't matter anymore. I've already faced my past. Something flickered in Ricardo's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that his leverage had been neutralized. but he recovered. "Quickly, have you?" he asked smoothly. "And what about the good people of this town? Do they know they have a woman responsible for a child's death living among them?" Artur took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists. "That's enough, Ricardo." But Helena put a restraining hand on his arm. "It's okay," she said softly. Then to Ricardo, "It was an accident, a terrible, tragic accident that I will regret every day of my life, but I'm not running from it anymore." Ricardo looked between them, seeming to realize his plan was unraveling. "Fine," he said, his voice hardening, "then let's talk business. I want to buy Morada Alta, and I'm prepared to offer well above market value." "The ranch isn't for sale," Artur said firmly. "Not to you, not to anyone." "Don't be a fool," Ricardo snapped, his composed facade cracking. "This place was never meant for you. Uncle Norberto knew that. Why do you think he put that 6-month condition in his will? He was hoping you'd come to your senses and sell." "Maybe he was," Artur agreed calmly. "Or maybe he was hoping I'd finally find something worth fighting for." He glanced at Helena, then back at his cousin. "Either way, my answer is no." Ricardo's face darkened with anger. "You'll regret this," he threatened, "both of you." "I don't think so," came a new voice. They all turned to see Dr. Santos approaching from his truck, which had pulled up behind Ricardo's car. The veterinarian carried a thick folder under his arm. "What is this?" Ricardo demanded. "Who are you?" "A friend," Dr. Santos said simply. He handed the folder to Artur. "I found what you asked for." Artur opened the folder, scanning its contents with growing satisfaction. "Thank you," he said to the vet. Then, turning to Ricardo, "Before you make any more threats, cousin, you should know that I've been doing some investigating of my own." He pulled out several documents from the folder. "These are records of your business dealings over the past 5 years, including some very interesting transactions with a certain development company that specializes in turning ranch land into resort properties." Ricardo's face paled. "Where did you get those?" "As you said," Artur replied, "I have friends. Friends who were happy to help when I explained what you were trying to do." He pulled out another document. "This one is particularly interesting, a pre-agreement to sell Morada Alta to Villa Nova Developments, signed by you 3 months ago, when the ranch wasn't even yours to sell." "That's nothing," Ricardo said dismissively. "A preliminary discussion, nothing more. With a substantial deposit paid to your personal account," Artur countered. "Money you've already spent, from what I understand, money you'd have to pay back if you don't deliver Morada Alta." Helena watched the exchange with growing understanding. Ricardo's desperation to buy the ranch wasn't just about resentment or family rivalry. He had already promised it to someone else, had already taken money for land he didn't own. "So here's my offer," Artur continued, his voice level. "You leave Morada Alta and Helena alone. You find another way to pay back the development company. And I don't share these documents with the authorities." Ricardo's face contorted with rage. "You can't prove anything," he spat. "Maybe not," Dr. Santos interjected. "But I suspect Villanova would be very interested to know they've been dealing with someone who never had the authority to sell Morada Alta in the first place. Fraud is a serious charge, Senor Mendonça." For a long moment, Ricardo stood frozen, clearly calculating his options. Then, with a muttered curse, he turned and stalked back to his car. "This isn't over," he called over his shoulder. But as they watched him drive away in a cloud of dust, Helena knew it was. Ricardo might still harbor resentment, might still wish. Morada Alta was his, but his leverage was gone. They were free. "Thank you," she said to Dr. Santos. The vet smiled. "No need for thanks. It's good to see you back where you belong." After he left, Helena turned to Artur. "How did you know? About Ricardo and the development company?" "I didn't," Artur admitted. "But I knew my cousin. Money has always been his weakness. He spends it faster than he earns it. When he suddenly appeared with an offer to buy Morada Alta, I suspected there was more to it than family sentiment." He gestured to the folder. "Dr. Santos has connections in town. It didn't take long to piece together what Ricardo was planning." Helena shook her head in wonder. "You're full of surprises, Artur Mendonça." He smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "So are you, Helena Silva." The moment was interrupted by Diego calling from the main stable. "Señor Artur, you need to... Come quickly, it's Tempest." Tempest lay on his side in the stall, his breathing labored, eyes half closed in pain. Dr. Santos, summoned back urgently, knelt beside the old horse, his expression grave. "Colic," he said to Artur and Helena, "and a bad case. His age makes it more dangerous." Artur felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. Colic was one of the most common killers of horses, and Tempest was already weakened by age and neglect. "Can you help him?" he asked, his voice tight. Dr. Santos sighed. "I'll do what I can. But he's very old, Artur, and he doesn't seem to have much fight left in him." Helena moved to kneel beside the horse, her hand gentle on his neck. "Hey, old boy," she said softly. "Don't give up yet. There's someone here who needs you." To Artur's surprise, Tempest's eyes flickered open at the sound of Helena's voice. The horse gave a soft whicker of recognition. "He knows you," Artur said. Amazed, Helena smiled sadly. "I've been coming to see him. When you were busy with the ranch business, I thought he seemed lonely." The admission touched Artur deeply. Even when he had resisted moving Tempest to the old stables, Helena had still cared for the horse, still recognized his worth. For the next several hours, they worked together to save Tempest. Dr. Santos administered medication, while Helena and Femme. Artur walked the horse slowly around the yard when he was able to stand, trying to relieve the painful gas buildup in his intestines. By nightfall, Tempest's condition had stabilized, but he was still weak. "The next 24 hours will be critical," Dr. Santos said as he prepared to leave. "Keep him hydrated, keep him moving if he can, and..." He hesitated. "Be prepared for the worst. At his age, recovery is never certain." After the vet left, Artur and Helena settled in for a long night. They took turns walking Tempest when he could stand, sitting with him when he couldn't. Hour after hour, they fought for the life of a horse that represented so much more than just an animal to both of them. For Helena, Tempest was another soul in need of healing, another chance to use her skills for good rather than running from them. For Artur, the horse was a link to his father, not the harsh, demanding man who had never accepted his son, but the skilled horseman who had built Morada Alta from nothing. As dawn approached, Tempest took a turn for the worse. His breathing became more labored, his eyes dulled with pain. Helena, who had been dozing in the corner of the stall, woke at the change in the horse's condition. "Artur," she called softly, alarm in her voice. Artur, who had been walking the perimeter of the stable to stretch his legs, rushed back. One look at Tempest told him everything he needed to know. The old horse was dying. "No," he whispered, dropping to his knees beside the animal. "Come on, Tempest. Don't give up now." Helena moved to the other side of the horse, her hands working, quickly to check his vital signs. "His pulse is weak," she reported, her voice professional despite the tears in her eyes. "And his gums are pale. He's going into shock." Artur felt a surge of helpless anger. "There must be something we can do." Helena met his gaze across Tempest's prone form. "Talk to him," she said simply. "Let him hear your voice. Let him know he's not alone." At first, Artur felt foolish. What could he possibly say to a dying horse? But then he remembered Helena's words from months ago. They are people. They just don't know how to speak with their mouths. Taking a deep breath, Artur began to speak. He told Tempest about his plans for Morada Alta, about the breeding program, about the sanctuary he wanted to create for horses like Luna and Marta. He told him about his childhood memories of watching Tempest in his prime, galloping across the fields with Seu Norberto on his back. "He loved you, you know," Artur said softly. "My father. He wasn't good at showing love to people, but with you, he was different." As he spoke, Artur felt something inside him shift, a loosening of the knot of resentment he had carried toward his father for so long. Seu Norberto had been a hard man, yes, a demanding father who had never understood his sensitive son. But he had also been human, with his own fears and limitations. "I forgive him," Artur said, the words surprising him even as he spoke them. "And I forgive you for carrying him away from me all those years." Whether it was the medication, finally, taking effect or something in Artur's voice that reached the horse on some deeper level, Tempest's breathing suddenly eased. His eyes, which had been glazed with pain, focused on Artur's face. "That's it," Helena encouraged from the other side. "Keep talking to him. He's listening." Through the rest of the night and into the morning, Artur continued his one-sided conversation with the horse. He talked until his voice grew hoarse, until the words blurred together, until the sun was high in the sky. And somehow, against all odds, Tempest began to improve. His breathing steadied, his pulse strengthened. By noon he was able to stand on shaky legs. By evening he was drinking water on his own. "It's remarkable," Dr. Santos said when he returned to check on the horse. "At his age, with colic this, I didn't think he'd make it." Helena smiled, her eyes meeting Artur's over the vet's shoulder. "He had something to live for," she said softly. That night, after Tempest had been moved to a clean stall with fresh bedding, after Dr. Santos had gone, and Diego had taken over watching the horse, Artur and Helena sat together on the veranda of the main house. The stars were bright overhead, the air cool and fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. "You saved him," Helena said, her head resting on Artur's shoulder. "We saved him," Artur corrected. "I couldn't have done it without you." Helena was quiet for a moment. "When I first came to Morada Alta," she said finally, "I thought I was just hiding, running from what I'd done." She looked up at the stars. "I never expected to find a purpose here, a home." Artur took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "When I came back, I thought I was just fulfilling an obligation, doing my time before I could escape again." He smiled. "I never expected to find you." Helena turned to face him, her eyes serious in the starlight. "What happens now?" she asked. "With the ranch, with the horses? With us?" Artur finished for her. Helena nodded, a vulnerability in her expression that tugged at his heart. "Now," Artur said, "we build something new. Together." He gestured toward the sprawling ranch around them. Morada Alta has always been about cattle, but it can be more than that. The horse breeding program is just the beginning. His eyes lit up with enthusiasm as he continued. "I've been thinking about what you said, about horses being mirrors, reflecting back what we bring to them. What if we created a place where people could come to heal through that connection? A kind of therapy center, using horses to help people who are struggling." Helena stared at him, amazement spreading across her face. "You want to create an equine therapy center? Here?" "Why not?" Artur asked. "We have the space, the resources, and between your veterinary knowledge and my business experience, we have the skills." He paused. "Unless you don't want to. If it's too much too soon..." Helena silenced him with a kiss, their first real kiss, full of promise and possibility. When she pulled away, her eyes were shining. "It's perfect," she said, "absolutely perfect." As they sat together under the stars, planning their future, Helena felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The path that had led her to Morada Alta had been marked by tragedy and pain, but it had also brought her to this moment, to this man, to this purpose. She was no longer running. She was home. Spring turned to summer, and summer to fall. The plans for the Equine Therapy Center at Morada Alta took shape, with Helena's expertise guiding every step. Tempest recovered fully and was moved to the old stables, where he quickly became the patriarch of Helena's rescued herd. Ricardo never returned. Through the small-town grapevine, they heard he had left Brazil entirely, headed for Europe to escape his creditors. The development company that had paid him for Morada Alta sent representatives to see Artur, but they left disappointed. The ranch was not for sale at any price. One crisp autumn morning, Helena woke early, slipping out of the bedroom she now shared with Artur in the main house. She left a note on her pillow, something she had taken to doing when inspiration struck in the early hours and she couldn't wait to get to the stables. But this note was different. She had been thinking about it for weeks, planning carefully without telling Artur. Today was the day. Eles agora têm você, e talvez você também tenha alguém. They now have you, and perhaps you also have someone. She packed a small bag with a few essentials and drove away from Morada Alta just as the sun was rising, casting long shadows across the fields she had come to love. When Artur found the note, his first reaction was panic. It was too similar to the note Helena had left before fleeing to Belo Horizonte, but as he read the words again, he realized this was different. This wasn't goodbye. This was a promise. He searched the ranch, asking Helena, Diego, even Dr. Santos when he came for his weekly visit. No one had seen Helena since the previous evening. No one knew where she had gone. Days turned into weeks. Artur threw himself into the work of the ranch and the development of the therapy center, trying not to let worry consume him. Helena had left of her own free will, had asked for space. He had to trust that she would return when she was ready. The old stables, now officially renamed Santuario Morada Alta, were nearly complete. New fencing had been installed, paddocks expanded, ramps and special equipment added for the therapy program. Helena's vision brought to life by Artur's determination. 3 months after Helena's departure, on a bright winter morning, Artur stood in the center of the sanctuary, watching as Luna, now an unofficial therapy horse herself, gently nuzzled a visiting child in a wheelchair. The therapy program was in its early stages, but already the results were promising. As he walked among the stalls, checking on each horse, Artur found himself drawn to the far paddock where the mares and foals were kept. Marta had given birth to another healthy foal the previous week, a spirited little filly with a white star on her forehead. As he approached the fence, Artur noticed a figure in the paddock, a woman in a straw hat, kneeling beside the newborn foal, her hand gently stroking its neck. She was too far away for him to see her face, but something about the way she moved, the way the horses gathered around her. His heart pounding, Artur walked closer. The woman must have heard his approach, because she turned slowly, her face shadowed by the brim of her hat. Then she stood and the hat fell back, revealing the face he had missed every day for 3 months. Helena. She looked different somehow, her hair longer, her face more relaxed, a new confidence in the way she held herself. But her smile, the smile that lit up her eyes when she saw him, was exactly the same. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Helena stepped forward, the foal following close behind her like a devoted puppy. "You came back," Artur said, his voice barely above a whisper. Helena nodded. "I always planned to," she said. "I just needed time to finish something." "What?" Artur asked, still trying to process the fact that she was really here, really back. In answer, Helena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small card. She handed it to him without a word. It was a veterinary license, new official with Helena's name and photo. "I retook the exams," she said simply. "I had to go back to school for a refresher course first. That's why I was gone so long." Artur stared at the license, then at Helena, amazement and pride washing over him. "You're practicing again?" "I will be," Helena confirmed, "as the staff veterinarian for Santuario Morada Alta." She gestured around them. "If the position is still open." "Always," Artur said, his voice thick with emotion. "It was always yours." He wanted to ask why she hadn't told him, why the mysterious note, but the answer was in her eyes. This was something she had needed to do on her own, a journey she had needed to complete by herself. "The sanctuary looks amazing," Helena said, looking around at what had once been just old stables. "You did all this while I was gone?" "I had your plans to follow," Artur said. "Your vision. I just executed it." Helena smiled, a full, radiant smile that took his breath away. "And the horses? How are they?" "Missing you," Artur admitted. "Especially Luna. She kept looking for you every morning." "And you?" Helena asked softly. "Did you miss me too?" In answer, Artur closed the distance between them, pulling her into an embrace that said everything words couldn't. Helena melted against him, her arms wrapping around his waist, her head finding that perfect spot on his shoulder. "Every day," he whispered into her hair. "Every single day." When they finally broke apart, Helena reached down to stroke the foal that had stayed close to her side. This little one was born while I was away, she said. What's her name? Esperanza, Artur said. Hope. Helena's eyes filled with tears. Perfect, she said softly. As they walked back toward the sanctuary together, Helena suddenly stopped. Before we go back, she said, there's something I need to say. Artur turned to face her, waiting. I didn't just leave to get my license back, Helena admitted. I needed to be sure that I wasn't running to you the way I ran to Morada, Alta 3 years ago, as an escape, a hiding place. Her eyes met his, clear and certain. I needed to know I was choosing you, choosing this life, not just fleeing from something else. Artur's heart swelled with love for this woman who had fought so hard to find her way back to herself. And, he asked, what did you decide? Helena smiled, reaching up to touch his face. I decided that running away is when you don't know where you're going, she said softly. But I always knew exactly where I belonged. Right here, with you, with the horses, with the life we're building together. Artur pulled her close again, overwhelmed by the rightness of having her back where she belonged. Why didn't you tell me what you were planning? He asked. I would have supported you. Helena drew back just enough to look into his eyes. Só voltei porque sei que você também aprendeu a escutar, sem a boca. I only came back because I know you've also learned to listen without your mouth. Artur understood immediately. This was Helena's final test, not of him, but of herself, of her ability to stand on her own, to make choices from strength rather than fear. And in giving her that space, that freedom, he had proven that he truly understood what she needed. As they walked back to the sanctuary hand in hand, the horses gathered at the fences to greet them. Luna wickered in recognition, her blind eyes, somehow finding Helena unerringly. Tempest, now the dignified elder of the herd, nodded his grey head as if approving of their reunion. Welcome home, Artur said, squeezing Helena's hand. Helena looked around at the sanctuary, at the horses, at the man beside her. I am home, she agreed. Finally. Truly home. Above them the sky stretched blue and limitless. Before them, Morada Alta spread out like a promise, and between them, a love built on understanding, on healing, on learning to listen with more than just their ears. Helena Silva had come to Morada Alta running from her past, but she had returned walking confidently toward her future. A future with Artur, with the horses, with purpose and meaning and joy. She was at last exactly where she was meant to be. The end.